OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center, and we're going to do another segment on becoming the expert. And I think today that we are going to talk about panic.
Yes, we are going to talk a little about panic, but I feel like the first thing when we talk about panic is we have to talk a little about the mind-body connection. Have you guys ever heard of the mind-body connection?
I don't think so. Not really.
Okay, so the mind and body are super powerful allies. They work together. So I think the first thing we have to do is just define what the mind is. So what would you guys think that the mind is? How would you define it?
Thoughts.
Wonderful. Okay, so yes, our mind, or we would say our state of mind, would include absolutely our thoughts. It would also include things like our beliefs, our attitudes, and for us, what we're going to talk about, or what's most important to us, is our emotions. So that is what our mind is. What would be our body?
Everything else.
Yes, it's all that we are physically, right? So that would include things like our digestion, it would include our cardiovascular system, it would include our muscles, and we've talked about this before. If you remember back to when we talked about generalized anxiety disorder, we talked a lot about this. We talked about how you can feel anxiety in your body, and that can create muscle tension and different sensations in your body. Well, this is also very true in panic disorder. You can feel different physical sensations because you have these thoughts, because you have these emotions. You start to feel different physical sensations. So what would you guys guess are some of the, and you probably don't have to guess because you've also felt some of them, right? So what are some of the things that you feel might be part of a panic attack?
Heart beating super, super fast.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's one that many people feel, is that rapid heart rate. What are some other ones?
Probably like numbness in your fingers.
Yes, and I think that's a really important one because what happens is your blood circulates differently. So it starts to centralize in your body and you start to feel some numbness in your fingers and toes. So that does happen, and I don't think a lot of people think about that. What else happens in panic attacks?
Sweating.
Yes, absolutely, sweating. Another one that isn't talked about as much with panic attacks is that you can kind of feel like you're going crazy. You can feel like you have almost left your body. You start to depersonalize or have derealization. And so those are some other symptoms of panic. Anything else that you guys would think about as part of a panic attack?
I don't know.
A lot of people, I said digestion, a lot of people get sick stomachs. And I think when you guys were little, you might not remember this, but you used to say, stomach is sick all the time. A lot of people get sick stomachs as they have panic attacks or just anxiety in general.
Right.
So there's a lot of physical sensations as part of panic attacks. And then there is something called panic disorder. Panic disorder is when you have reoccurrent or you have panic attacks often, and because panic attack, these physical sensations or symptoms, they're not fun, right? When your heart starts racing, when you start sweating, and when you're having anxiety or distress, does any of those things sound fun?
No, not at all.
And actually, a lot of people, when they start having these symptoms, especially that rapid heart rate that you talked about, this can sometimes even lead to visits at the emergency department or emergency room. And so we oftentimes in our clinic will get people that have been referred by the emergency room because they have all the testing necessary, and at the end of the day, it is just that mind-body connection. It is their mind that has led to the emotion of anxiety or distress, which starts to cause those physical symptoms that leads them to the emergency room.
Yeah.
And so because of that, because it's awful, an awful feeling, they don't want to have it again, and they start to worry about when that's going to happen. And they start to worry because when you're at school, you don't want to think to yourself, I'm going to have a panic attack in front of all of my friends.
Right.
If you're driving a car, you don't want to think to yourself, What if I start to have paralysis because of this? You don't want to think my fingers and toes are going to go numb. And what if I got in an accident? You start thinking about the uncertainty around all of the situations that might happen if you get a panic attack.
Yeah.
And so that worry grows and grows, and what might happen. And so you start avoiding situations, right? And you can totally see why people would do that. So they start changing their behaviors because of the consequences that they can think of would happen because of a panic attack.
Right.
And those are the things that make up panic disorder. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes
absolutely. So I want to just use some key terms of that mind-body connection. What we call that is interoceptive. And why that's so important is, you guys know, I always like to end on a positive note, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What do you guys think my positive note is going to be about panic disorder?
We can face it.
Yes, the treatment, right? The treatment of panic disorder is just as effective as all the other diagnoses that I get to talk about, whether that is OCD or whether that's panic disorder or whether that is generalized anxiety disorder or social anxiety disorder. Exposure work is so effective. But in panic disorder, we call it interoceptive exposure because in particular, we're talking about that mind-body connection. And so we get to face the effects of those physical symptoms. So our exposures are going to be, maybe we're going to run around the room and purposefully have that rapid heart rate. Maybe we're going to have some shortness of breath. We are going to elicit on purpose the physical symptoms that might cause fear for someone that faces panic. And what's so amazing about it is it's so effective. So I always love that. And then we're going to always throw in some other strategies that we know are effective as well, like thinking errors and of course some mindfulness, because we know how important it is in all anxiety-based disorders or OCD or OC spectrum disorders to stay present in the moment that we are instead of worrying about the future or thinking about the past. So we hope this has been helpful today, and we hope that you will tune in next time and learn more with us.
Bye.